Airs live every morning at 7 Eastern here on C-SPAN. The House is coming in now to debate a number of bills renaming post offices and other federal buildings.
Under Clause 6 of Rule 20, record votes on postponed questions will be taken after 6:30 p.m. today. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 588.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
House Calendar Number 88, H.R. 588, a bill to redesignate the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge as the Sam D. Hamilton Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentlewoman from Guam, Ms. Bordello, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials under the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, under H.R. 588, the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge in Mississippi will be renamed after the former director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Sam Hamilton, who recently died at the young age of 54. It's my understanding, Madam Speaker, that his first outdoors job was at the Noxubee Refuge, where he learned to ban wood ducks and manage wildlife habitat. I want to compliment my friend and colleague from Mississippi, Congressman Greg Harper, for introducing this no-cost legislation, which I think is a fitting tribute to Sam Hamilton and what all he stood for. And with that, I urge adoption of the resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Ms. Bordello is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 588, which would redesignate the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge as the Sam D. Hamilton Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge. Madam Speaker, it is abundantly clear that everyone who worked with Director Hamilton during his 3+ decades of public service had the utmost respect and admiration for him. His lifelong commitment to conservation and restoration of some of the nation's most important species and ecosystems started at Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge. And so it is fitting that this place is memorialized in his honor. I commend my colleague, Congressman Harper from Mississippi, for introducing his bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves.
Madam Speaker, I am very pleased to yield 3 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper.
The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak in support of H.R. 588, legislation that I introduced to redesignate the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge as the Sam D. Hamilton Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge. This legislation is a companion bill to S-266 introduced by Mississippi Senator Thad Cochran, which passed the Senate on February 17, 2011. I want to thank Senator Cochran for his leadership on this and many other conservation matters. H.R. 588 honors Mr. Sam D. Hamilton, a lifetime conservationist and a great man who spent 30 years at the Fish and Wildlife Service, ultimately rising to director in 2009. Established in 1940, the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge consists of 48,000 acres in east central Mississippi. Approximately 170,000 people visit the refuge annually and enjoy hunting, fishing, hiking, and other outdoor and recreational activities. Mr. Hamilton had a long and personal history with the refuge. A native of Starkville, Mississippi, he recalled during his confirmation testimony that he caught his first fish at the refuge at the age of 5 and began his conservation career there as an employee at age 15. Sam called the refuge system the finest collection of public lands and waters dedicated to fish and wildlife conservation in the world. Upon graduating from Mississippi State University, Sam started a career that spanned 30 years at the Fish and Wildlife Service. On September 1st, 2009, Sam Hamilton was sworn in as the 15th Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Regrettably, Sam passed away on February the 20th, 2010. Honoring Sam by renaming the refuge would be a tribute to his remarkable career and his commitment to conservation. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation recently provided a grant to the Friends of Noxubee Refuge that will allow the name change to occur without the federal government incurring these costs. I would also like to thank Chairman Hastings and Subcommittee Chairman Fleming for their support and look forward to working with you to ensure this legislation is signed into law to remember a man who devoted his life and career to the ideals formed during his early days at the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back, and the gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentlewoman from Guam is recognized.
Madam Speaker, again, I urge my colleagues to support Bill 588, which is a bill that would rename the Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge as the Sam D. Hamilton Noxubee National Wildlife Refuge. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Guam yields back. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 588? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Who's next? Okay, it's Fairholt from Texas. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2079.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2079, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 10 Main Street in East Rockaway, New York, as the John J. Cook Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fairholt, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I'd also like to ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 2079, introduced by the gentlelady from New York, Ms. McCarthy, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 10 Main Street in East Rockaway, New York, as the John J. Cook Post Office. This bill was introduced in June of this year and was favorably reported out of the Committee of Oversight and Government Reform on November 3rd. Madam Speaker, John J. Cook served the community of East Rockaway, New York for more than 6 decades, working as a letter carrier at a facility to be named after him. Serving his community for 60 years and 4 months, Mr. Cook went above and beyond to serve his neighborhood and exemplified the professionalism and courtesy each and every day on the job. Mr. Cook delivered mail on the same route for nearly all of his 60 years on the job, and according to many in his community, he continually touched the lives of countless people spanning generations. According to one East Rockaway resident, he was the best. He knew all of his customers very well and gave personalized service throughout his career. The resident went on to say that they just don't make people like him anymore. Sadly, Madam Speaker, Mr. Cook passed away in 2005 at the age of 78. He left behind his wife, Roberta, and many who will miss this true public servant and model postal employee. I urge all members to join me in naming the postal facility in East Rockaway, New York, after John J. Cook. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
As the ranking member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, I'm pleased to join my colleagues in supporting H.R. 2079, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 10 Main Street in East Rockaway, New York, as the John P. Cook Post Office. The measure before us was introduced by Representative Carolyn McCarthy on June 1st, 2011. In accordance with committee requirements, H.R. 2079 is co-sponsored by all members of the New York delegation. It was reported out of the Oversight Committee by unanimous consent on November 3rd, 2011. H.R. 2079 honors John B. Cook, a man who worked for more than 60 years with our nation's postal service. Mr. Cook began working for what was then the United States Postal Department on January 8, 1944, after returning from service in World War II. From 1948 until his retirement in 2004, he walked the same route 6 days a week, with neither snow nor sleet nor rain preventing him from completing his appointed duties. Mr. Cook was a fixture in the East Rockaway community, known and beloved by all. Even now, 7 years after his retirement, East Rockaway residents fondly recall Mr. Cook's kindness and empathy as a public servant. By all accounts, he went above and beyond the call of duty to serve his neighbors. His professionalism, courtesy, and dedication to the job made him a model letter carrier. After 60 years and 4 months of faithful service to the United States Postal Service, Mr. Cook passed away in 2005 at the age of 78. Mr. Cook's career is a stunning example of what our dedicated postal workers contribute to our communities. Even as the Postal Service faces severe financial and operational strains, we must never forget that the service's success depends on the dedication of employees like John Cook. Madam Speaker, I ask that we pass H.R. 2079 in recognition of Mr. John P. Cook's commitment to his work at the Postal Service, his compassion for his community, and his service to a grateful nation. I also ask that we keep the example of his career in mind as we work together to craft what should be a bipartisan piece of legislation to ensure that the institution Mr. Cook loved so much can continue to serve our nation. And with that, I urge the passage of H.R. 2079, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Chair, at this point, I would like to withdraw my motion.
The motion is withdrawn. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3004.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3004, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 260 California Drive in Yountville, California as a private first-class Alejandro R. Ruiz Post Office building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 3004, introduced by the gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service at 260 California Drive in Yountville, California as a private first-class Alejandro R. Ruiz Post Office building. This bill is co-sponsored by the entire California State Delegation and was reported by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on November the 3rd. Madam Speaker, It is altogether fitting and proper that we name this post office for Private First Class Ruiz. Born on April 26, 1924, in Loving, New Mexico, PFC Ruiz enlisted in the Army during World War II and was deployed to the island of Okinawa in 1945. On April 28, 1945, PFC Ruiz and his platoon were ambushed by Japanese soldiers hiding in fortified bunkers. Under a hail of machine gun fire, with enemy grenades being lobbed from every direction, PFC Ruiz single-handedly killed 12 Japanese soldiers and completely destroyed the enemy machine gun nest. In the face of overwhelming odds, PFC Ruiz acted with the utmost courage, risking his own life to save the lives of many of his fellow soldiers. While he was shot in the leg during the battle, PFC Ruiz and his squad leader were the only two men to escape death or serious injury that day. For his bravery and valor, Private First Class Ruiz was presented with the Medal of Honor by President Truman in June of 1964. He went on to continue his service in the Army, fighting in the Korean War, and retired a Master Sergeant in the mid-1960s. Sadly, Madam Speaker, on November 23, 2009, Private First Class Ruiz died of congestive heart failure at a hospital in Napa, California, at 85 years of age. I'm truly grateful for the service of Private First Class Ruiz and all the men and women who put their lives on the line to protect and defend our country each day. I urge all members to join me in strong support of this bill. And at that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to join my colleagues in supporting H.R. 3004, which designates the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 260 California Drive in Yountville, California, as a Private First Class Alejandro R. Ruiz Post Office building. This measure was introduced on September 21, 2011 by our colleague, Representative Mike Thompson, and has been co-sponsored by all members of the California delegation. H.R. 3004 was favorably reported out of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee on November 3, 2011. Alejandro R. Ruiz served his country valiantly for nearly 20 years, reaching the rank of Master Sergeant by the time of his retirement. Born in New Mexico, Mr. Ruiz served our nation with exceptional courage and valor. During service in World War II, his unit, the 27th Infantry Division of the 165th Infantry, was ambushed by Japanese troops sheltered in a camouflage pillbox in Okinawa. Private First Class Ruiz grabbed an automatic rifle and charged forward through a storm of bullets and grenades. As an enemy soldier rushed towards him, his weapon jammed. After clubbing the enemy with the butt of the rifle, Private First Class Ruiz grabbed a different rifle, charged the pillbox, and killed 20 enemy soldiers stationed inside. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions. Mr. Ruiz died on November 23, 2009, of heart failure in Yountville, California. He was 85 years old. Madam Speaker, I ask that we pass H.R. 3004 to honor Alejandro Ruiz's heroic actions in defense of our nation, as well as the long and productive life he lived thereafter. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no other speakers at this moment, so I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
I yield the gentleman and sponsor of the bill, Congressman Mike Thompson, 3 minutes.
California. The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for bringing this bill to the floor. And Ranking Member, thank you for your good work on this and for recognizing time for me to speak on this. This is very near and dear to me. The California Veterans Home in Yountville, California is in the heart of my district and my home county. I've known it my entire life, and it's been home to many brave men and women who have served courageously in our military. These are heroes and heroines who put their life on the line for everything that we as Americans believe in and everything that we enjoy today. There's a post office on that facility that provides mail service for 1,100 heroes and heroines at the California Veterans Home. These guys get their mail there every day. It's saves them from having to go to make an impossible trek to the closest town. If they were forced to do that, it would put them again in harm's way because it's a very dangerous route to travel, and in their advanced ages it makes no sense for them to have to do that. So this is a very, very important facility. And here, just recently, a very distinguished hero at the California Veterans Home, Alejandro Ruiz, passed away. And the reason that we want to name the post office after Alejandro Ruiz is because he earned a Congressional Medal of Honor. Now, it's already been noted on the floor, the heroic activities of the day in question, but here's a man who, without any concern for his own safety, charged an enemy pillbox filled with enemy combatants, avoiding rifle fire, avoiding grenades, and took this responsibility on to save his comrades who were there fighting with him. When his weapon became disabled, he returned, got another weapon, more ammunition, and again charged this pillbox. On the second attempt, he was able to reach the pillbox, get on top of it, and dispatch all of those who were trying to kill his comrades. Had it not been for his activity, many Americans would have lost their life that day, and the advancement of the American troops would have been stopped. This man is a true hero. That's probably redundant given that he's received the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I think it's the appropriate tribute to name this postal facility after Alejandro Ruiz. And I thank the chairman and the ranking member, and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no other speakers at this time. I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
We have no further speakers, Madam Speaker. Therefore, we will yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I urge all members to support the passage of this bill, H.R. 3004, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3004? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Madam Speaker, I object to the vote that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass S. 1412.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1412, an act to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 462 Washington Street, Woburn, Massachusetts, as the Officer John McGuire Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. I'd also ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, S. 1412, introduced by Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 462 Washington Street, Woburn, Massachusetts, as the Officer John McGuire Post Office. The bill passed the Senate by unanimous consent on October 20th and was reported favorably by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on November the 3rd. Madam Speaker, John McGuire was born and raised in Woburn, Massachusetts, growing up in a home where his father was chief of police in Woburn for 15 years. After graduating from the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, Officer McGuire was sworn in as a Woburn police officer by his own father in June of 1977. Wearing badge number 23, which has been his father's badge number, Officer McGuire worked for over 3 decades as a tireless public servant protecting the people of Woburn. On December 26th of last year, 3 armed men went into a department store in Woburn and proceeded to steal money and jewelry. Arriving on the scene to back up his fellow officers, Officer McGuire used his cruiser to block the gunmen who were fleeing on foot from the store. Exiting his vehicle, Officer McGuire and one of the suspects exchanged gunfire. Officer McGuire was able to kill the suspect, but tragically, he was mortally wounded himself. Officer McGuire had celebrated his 60th birthday just 3 days prior to his death and was less than a year away from retirement. Madam Speaker, it is altogether fitting and proper that we name this post office in Woburn for Officer John McGuire. And to Officer McGuire and all those who wear a badge and courageously protect and serve our town, cities, and counties each and every day, we are eternally grateful for all that you do and all that you sacrifice. I urge all members to join me in strong support of this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, you and myself, such time as I may consume. I urge the body to pass this legislation, and I would yield to the sponsor, Mr. Markey of Massachusetts, 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman very much. I thank Mr. Farenthold as well, and this is a very important bill. I rise today in support of H.R. 2640, which I introduced in the House of Representatives, and Senate 1412, introduced by Senator Kerry and Senator Brown. And that is to name the Woburn Post Office in honor of Officer John, but his friends called him Jack McGuire. At 9 p.m. on December 26, 2010, during the height of a blizzard, 2 men invaded a Kohl's department store on Washington Street in Woburn, Massachusetts, to rob the jewelry counter as the employees prepared to close. As one robber entered the store, the second stood lookout on the outside while a third man waited in a nearby getaway vehicle. The robber in the department store was a career criminal with a long and violent record. He took a large amount of jewelry and fled outside the store into the driving snow. Eyewitnesses and store employees dialed 911. Officer McGuire arrived in the parking lot moments after the robbery. He saw an officer chasing a gunman on foot and drove his cruiser to a location to prevent the escape of the gunman into a residential neighborhood in Woburn. Officer McGuire jumped out of his cruiser on Washington Street, and the gunman opened fire on him. Shots were exchanged, and the gunman was killed. Unfortunately, Officer McGuire was shot 4 times in the torso and was transported to a local trauma center where he was pronounced, unfortunately, that he had passed away. Officer McGuire paid the ultimate price, protecting the citizens of Woburn. We are incredibly grateful for his selfless acts that day, which capped 34 years of outstanding dedication to the safety of the people of Woburn. On June 26, 1977, Officer McGuire began his career by being sworn in by his father, Police Chief Thomas McGuire, a longtime friend of mine, and he was so proud to follow in his father's footsteps. On December 26, 2010, he died wearing badge 23, which had been his own father's badge number. Just days before his death, he had celebrated his 60th birthday and given notice of his intention to retire in October of 2011. A devoted husband and caring father, Officer McGuire is survived by his wife, Desiree, and his children, Brian and Tara and Sean. Officer McGuire died protecting the residents of Woburn from an armed gunman. He was the first officer killed in the line of duty from the Woburn Police Department since its inception in 1847. It was a tragedy for his family, and for the Woburn Police Department and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to have lost such an honorable father, a courageous cop, and a hometown hero. That is why, at the request of Mayor Scott Galvin of Woburn, of Police Chief Richard Kelly, and former Police Chief Philip Mahoney of the Woburn Police Department, I introduced H.R. 2640 to rename the Woburn Post Office in the memory of Officer John Jack McGuire. Renaming the post office located at 462 Washington Street, just a few hundred yards across the street from where Officer McGuire was shot and killed, in his honor is the least that we can do to pay tribute to this brave, dedicated first responder. We honor his service and sacrifice. We honor his life and his legacy. And we honor police officers everywhere who go to work every day to protect the safety and security of all citizens. Today we are considering an identical bill that was introduced by my colleagues, Senator Kerry and Senator Brown. I urge adoption of this bill, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 462 Washington Street, Woburn, Massachusetts, as the Officer John McGuire Post Office, to honor the legacy of a true hometown hero. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I, too, continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
We have no further speakers, and we would yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I urge all members to support the passage of Senate 1412, and I yield back the balance of my time as well.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 1412? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does it?
Can I get the? I'd like to request the yeas and nays.
The gentleman. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 298.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 298, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 500 East Whitestone Boulevard in Cedar Park, Texas, as the Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, with the observance of Veterans Day this past Friday, it is timely and fitting that we name this post office in Cedar Park for Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris, a Texan and a true American hero who gave his life courageously defending freedom. I would now like to yield as much time as you may consume to my distinguished colleague and friend from the great state of Texas, the sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Carter.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he might consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 298, a bill that would designate the United States Post Office located at 500 East Whitestone Boulevard in Cedar Park, Texas, as the Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris Post Office Building. Mr. Speaker, I have the high honor of representing the brave men and women of Fort Hood, Texas, the largest military installation in the world. Every day that I have the opportunity to serve in Congress, I do so knowing that my #1 responsibility is to give our men and women in uniform the support and resources they need to be successful. Each time I visit Fort Hood, I see America's finest, the soldiers who put it all on the line to allow us to live in the greatest country on earth. Only 3 days ago, we celebrated Veterans Day, a sober reminder that freedom is not free. And today, here on the House floor, we remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Another reminder to all of us that freedom is not free. Representing Fort Hood, Texas also comes with a sober reminder of the sacrifice that our young men and women in the military and their families make to the cause of freedom. September the 11th, 2001, since September 11th, 2001, 384 Army soldiers have been killed in action from the 31st District in Texas, the highest number of any congressional district in the country. Central Texans and their families have sacrificed much and know that freedom is not free. Today we celebrate the life and remember one of those patriots who served our country and gave his all, Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris. Matthew Morris was born on July the 16th, 1984 in Fairfax, Virginia. He attended Fishburne Military School in Waynesboro, Virginia, where he earned an ROTC Leadership Award. He later attended Cedar Park High School in Cedar Park, Texas, and went on to score in the 90th percentile on each section of the General Education Development Tests. Specialist Morris enlisted in the United States Army in December 2005 and attended basic combat training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, followed by advanced individual training at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. He graduated from AIT in June of '06 as a power generation equipment mechanic and was assigned to a howitzer battery, 2nd Squadron, and the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment at Fort Hood, Texas. Specialist Morris served in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division in Balad. Despite the dangerous nature of his work, he remained devoted to his mission, and the heroism he demonstrated in Iraq earned him the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Army Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon, Overseas Service Ribbon, and Combat Action Ribbon. Matthew Troy Morris was killed on April the 6th, 2008, when his vehicle encountered a makeshift bomb in Balad, Iraq. Matthew was only 23 years old. He is the oldest of 4 children, leaving behind Corey, Katie, and Sam. Matthew's parents are Lisa and Glenn Morris of Cedar Park, Texas. His father, Glenn, served our country in the Vietnam War, and we should thank him for his service. Matthew was engaged to be married to Ms. Julia Richardson. He is survived by his grandparents, Nancy Jackson and Joanne Walters, his aunt, Diane Athlerbach, uncles John and Brian Walters. The sacrifice our military families make often goes unnoticed, and I would like the entire Morris family to know that we will never forget Matthew and the pain that they have endured at his loss. Our country and this House has not forgotten Matthew, and we are proud to celebrate his life on this day. Matthew Morris exemplified the highest ideas of the United States Armed Forces, and although his passing left a void in the lives of those who were fortunate enough to know him, they will forever carry the memories of this heroic young man close to their hearts. Mr. Speaker, I urge the passage of House H.R. 298 and ask my colleagues to join in honoring an American patriot and a hero, Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris of Cedar Park, Texas. On Saturday, I was at the dedication of the Veterans Memorial in Cedar Park, which holds a likeness of this young specialist, and there were hundreds of citizens, probably 500 people there, to celebrate that memorial. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose, gentleman from Maryland?
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 298, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 500 East Whitestone Boulevard in Cedar Park, Texas, as the Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris Post Office Building. The measure before us was introduced by Congressman John Carter in accordance with our committee requirements. H.R. 298 has been co-sponsored by all the members of the Texas delegation. It was reported favorably by the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee on November 3rd, 2011. Army Specialist Matthew Troy Morris was born on July 16, 1984, just across the Potomac River in Fairfax, Virginia. He was killed while serving in Balad, Iraq on Sunday, April 6, 2008, after only 23 short years of life. Specialist Morris was a loving son to his parents, Lisa and Glenn Morris, and a caring brother to his siblings, Corey, Katie, and Sam. Friends and family describe him as a dedicated soldier and an energetic and inspiring young man. Matthew Morris joined the Army immediately after high school and was assigned to the 2nd Squadron of the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment based in Fort Hood, Texas. While serving in Iraq, he earned the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the National Service Defense Medal, and several other decorations for heroism. Specialist Morris was a talented young man whose courage and sacrifice will forever be remembered. Mr. Speaker, I ask that we pass the underlying bill to recognize Specialist Morris's valor, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Reserve.
I reserve the balance of my time.
Well, having no further speakers, Mr. Speaker, we will yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'm truly grateful for the brave and heroic service of Specialist Morris and the countless other veterans who sacrificed their time, their families that sacrificed their time, the bravery and courage of all our veterans in serving our country and protecting us protecting our freedom. It is true, freedom is not free, and veterans like Specialist Matthew Troy Morris, whom we're proposing to name this post office app, are perfect examples of the bravery and courage of the American military. Specialist Morris was born on July 16, 1984 in Fairfax, Virginia. He later attended Cedar Park High School in Cedar Park, Texas. Specialist Morris was in Iraq and is serving as part of the Army's 2nd Squadron, 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division, based out of Fort Hood. Tragically, on April 6, 2008, at just 23 years of age, Specialist Morris was killed when his vehicle he was riding in hit an improvised makeshift bomb. Specialist Morris left behind his parents, 3 siblings, a fiancée, and dozens of other family and friends. For the bravery, courage, and heroism he displayed, Specialist Morris was awarded the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and National Service Defense Medal. Mr. Speaker, our nation is eternally thankful for his sacrifice, and I urge all members to join me in strong support of this bill, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back, all time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 298? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended.
I request the yeas and nays.
Gentlemen, the yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2422.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2422, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 45 Bay Street, Suite 2 in Staten Island, New York, as the Sergeant Angel Mendez Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to yield to Mr. Grimm as much time as he may consume.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Grimm, we recognize for as much time as you might consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor a brother, a member of the United States Marine Corps. he gave his life for his country and fellow Marines during the Vietnam War. Sergeant Angel Mendez was born to Puerto Rican-American parents, but was raised in the Mission of the Immaculate Virgin, an orphanage located in Mount Loretto, in my hometown in Staten Island, New York. When Angel graduated from high school in 1964, he volunteered to join the United States Marine Corps. Angel Mendez was assigned to Company Foxtrot, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division, as a corporal, and often said he found a family in the United States Marine Corps. His company participated in Operation DeSoto in Duc Pho, Vietnam. During a search and destroy mission on March 16, 1967, Mendez and his company were taken under intense Viet Cong fire. Half of the company sat across an open rice paddy, separated by enemy fire, and among them was the platoon commander, Lieutenant Ronald Castile. He had been shot in his right leg, and without hesitation, Sergeant Mendez volunteered to lead a small squad to help his fellow Marines and move Lieutenant Castile to safety. Castile remembers Mendez shouting, "I'm coming, Lieutenant, I'm coming," as he crossed the open paddy, providing cover fire for the platoon commander and other wounded Marines. Mendez shielded Lieutenant Castile with his own body as he dressed the wound on his leg and attempted to carry the commander to safety. But it was at this point that he was shot in the shoulder. 2 Marines came to aid Mendez in carrying Lieutenant Castile to safety, but he refused to let go of the lieutenant and chose to directly expose himself to enemy fire while still carrying Castile's legs. Mendez was shielding Castile and the other Marines with his own body when he was mortally wounded. Lieutenant Castile survived the attack, which occurred on his 23rd birthday, and later went on to become the District Attorney of Philadelphia and Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Sergeant Angel Mendez is a true hero. He gave his life protecting fellow Marines, and in honor of his bravery, he was posthumously promoted to Sergeant and awarded the Navy Cross, the 2nd highest award for valor a Marine can receive. Angel Mendez is survived by his brother Ismael and sister-in-law Ida, who have long sought recognition for Angel's heroic actions on that day. I believe it is important for Congress to honor the sacrifice of my fellow Marine. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2422 in honor of Sergeant Angel Mendez and designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 45 Bay Street in Staten Island, New York, as the Sergeant Angel Mendez Post Office. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
I yield myself such time as I may consume, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman is recognized.
I'm very pleased to join my colleagues in supporting H.R. 2422, and I would yield to Mr. Perluisi of Puerto Rico. 5 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend my colleague, Congressman Grimm, for introducing this bill to name a post office in his Staten Island district after Sergeant Angel Mendez, who at age 20 in Vietnam laid down his life for his fellow Marines, earning the Navy Cross for his actions. Sergeant Mendez died far too young, but his short life was filled with greatness. With his bill, Congressman Grimm, a devil dog himself, honors Sergeant Mendez, the Marine Corps, and this country. The bond between New York and Puerto Rico is deep and strong. Sergeant Mendez's parents were born in Puerto Rico, and like so many island residents of their generation, moved to New York in search of a better life for themselves and their children. How Sergeant Mendez came to possess such character and courage will never be known. And in fact, I am moved by the description just made by Congressman Grimm about his valor in Vietnam. But on that day in 1967, when he was mortally wounded on a battlefield thousands of miles from Staten Island, this New York son of Puerto Rican heritage became an American hero. Today, thanks to Congressman Grimm, we pay tribute to his strength and his sacrifice and engrave his name in stone. I am now, more than ever, a proud Puerto Rican American remembering the life of Sergeant Angel Mendez. Thank you, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2422, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, before I continue, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend their remarks to include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 2422, introduced by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Grimm, designating the postal facility at 45 Bay Street, Suite 2 in Staten Island as the Sergeant Angel Mendez Post Office, was introduced in July and favorably reported by the Government Oversight and Reform Committee on November the 3rd. Stories like that of Sergeant Mendez demonstrate the bravery and courage of all those who have served or are serving in our armed forces. I urge all members to join me in strong support of this bill, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time having expired, the question.
Mr. Speaker, I hadn't yielded back yet.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I too join in urging our members to vote in favor of 2422. Without a doubt, Sergeant Angel Mendez was a very courageous young man. He gave a lot for his country, and he certainly deserves this rich honor. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. All time having expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2422? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill will be passed.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
I'd like to request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2660.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2660, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 122 North Holdreth Boulevard in Tomball, Texas as the Tomball Veterans Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material in the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 2660, introduced by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service at 122 North Holdreth Boulevard in Tomball, Texas as the Tomball Veterans Post Office. The bill is co-sponsored by the entire Texas delegation, and Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor myself. At this point, I'd like to, there's no way a grateful nation can adequately express our thanks to those who served. However, naming this post office in Tomball after those who served is a small but fitting gesture to the brave men and women who are the reason this country is free. I commend my colleague from Texas for introducing this legislation, and with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield as much time as he may consume to my distinguished colleague and friend from the great state of Texas, the sponsor of this bill, Mr. McCall.
Gentleman to recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my good friend and colleague from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, for his support in my legislation. I rise in support of our nation's veterans and in support of this legislation, which would designate the post office located at 122 North Holdreth Boulevard in Tomball, Texas, as the Tomball Veterans Post Office. It is appropriate, Mr. Speaker, that on the first legislative day after Veterans Day, that this House would honor its veterans for their sacrifice and fidelity to our country. I cannot think of a more deserving community than Tomball, Texas, in my district. Mr. Speaker, I just returned this weekend from visiting our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan and meeting with the President of Pakistan. I also visited our wounded warriors at Longstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany on Veterans Day. I'm pleased to report that our men and women in uniform are doing tremendous work and have made extraordinary progress in the war on terror. I was also humbled by our troops' sacrifice and unwavering commitment to our mission. In Afghanistan, I witnessed the fruits of our soldiers' labor. For the first time, women are being educated, and Afghans are enjoying freedoms the likes of which they could only dream about under the Taliban's brutal regime. In Iraq, where Saddam Hussein and his henchmen once brutalized the Iraqi people and silenced their voices, democracy is beginning to take shape. Today, the Iraqi people are free to express their diverse points of view and engage in the same kind of political discourse that we are engaged in here right now in this very chamber. It is because of our soldiers that this is possible, that the American people can be saved from terror and tyranny, and that others around the world, for the first time in their lives, experience the freedoms which we so often take for granted. I am so proud of our soldiers and what they have accomplished. Soldiers like Marine Corporal Jeffrey Johnson of Tomball, who lost his life in Afghanistan in 2010, defending America and what our country stands for in the world. Last year, I attended Jeffrey's funeral in the small town of Tomball, where over 30,000 people, 30,000 grateful Americans, lined up in the streets to show their respect for a true American hero. This unbelievable outpouring of support demonstrated that patriotism and love of country are still alive and well in America. It's thanks to veterans like Jeffrey Johnson and so many others from Texas and across this great country that this is possible. And for that, we must honor our men and women who have served in uniform. That is also why I'm active with the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress, which preserves and makes accessible the personal accounts of American war veterans so that future generations may hear directly from veterans and better understand the realities of war. My father, a World War II veteran who flew bombing missions over Nazi Germany, always reminded me that his generation, often called the greatest generation, handed down a better America to my generation. That same can be said for today's veterans, such as Tomball heroes like Jeffrey Johnson, whose sacrifices are building a better America today. And so to all of Americans, veterans, let me say on behalf of this distinguished body, thank you. Thank you for your service. And I urge my colleagues to join me in passing this legislation. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 2660, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 122 North Holdreth Boulevard in Tomball, Texas, as the Tomball Veterans Post Office. This past Friday, our nation celebrated and honored the heroic service of all our nation's veterans. Continuing that celebration, I urge that we enact H.R. 2660, introduced by Congressman Michael Grimm. This legislation is supported by all the members of the Texas delegation and was considered and reported favorably by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on November 3, 2011. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, an estimated 1.7 million of our nation's 22.5 million veterans live in the state of Texas. The legislation before us would commemorate the service of the veterans of Tomball, Texas, by naming their local post office in their honor. Such a commemoration is but a small token of the debt our nation owes its veterans. At a time when veterans returning from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan face higher unemployment rates than the general population, and when our veterans urgently need a range of services as they recover from both physical and psychological wounds, we must make it our highest priority to ensure veterans have quick and easy access to all the services and benefits they have earned by the commitments they have made and kept to our nation. That said, Mr. Speaker, let us come together in support of dedicating the Tomball, Texas Post Office to its hometown veterans by passing H.R. 2660, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Texas.
I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland.
We have no more speakers, and with that, we will yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues in urging strong support for this bill honoring our heroic veterans. You know, there's never enough way we can thank the veterans who served so bravely this country. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. All time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2660? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds having voted in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
I object to the vote that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?